Does any delegation wish to make a statement in connection with the draft resolution? I give the floor to His Excellency, the Permanent Representative of the Syrian Arab Republic.
شكرا سيدي الرئيس.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to begin with two specific comments. First of all, I want to congratulate the permanent representative of Saudi Arabia, my colleague, for the fact that Israel has joined the list of co-sponsors to this resolution. That in itself, I think, clearly demonstrates the secret alliance between his country and Israel. Second comment. And I would like to refer to Twitter here. And specifically a tweet by the former representative of the United States, Samantha Power. And I'll allow me to quote in English what Samantha Power read.
Ended support for a Saudi-led coalition that, in addition to killing thousands of civilians, in Yemen of course, through airstrikes, is now starving the Yemeni people. Enough is enough. هذه خاطرة كتبتها السفيرة الأمريكية السابقة.
Now, this is a statement made by the former permanent representative of the United States, Samantha Power here. Now, before I make my statement, I just want to remind my colleague, representative of Saudi Arabia, that his country, together with Qatar, have spent $137 billion to destroy Syria. That is an admission made by the former Prime Minister of Qatar on official Qatari television last week. He said explicitly that Saudi Arabia and Qatar have together spent $137 billion to attract Islamist terrorism to our country, to my country. And in addition to that is the exorbitant sum spent to destroy Yemen, and a third huge sum to destroy Iraq, and another a large amount of money to destroy Libya, and other places that I don't want to specifically mention. This is what the Saudi regime does. This is what it does with its vast wealth, which fell into its lap. Basically, a present from a present that it received. So basically, it finances terrorism, promoting terrorism, and destroying the image of Muslims and Arabs around the world. That is the main achievement of the Saudi regime. Mr. Chairman, once again, we meet here in this committee to discuss a futile draft resolution presented by the United States, Great Britain, France, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Israel. It's a very expressive, I think, list, which includes all the sponsors of terrorism, all those who stir trouble around the world, who kill people, who colonize. And here, at a moment of it's a moment of truth here, and I'd like to ask them, how can we justify to ourselves and to our people? How can we trust those who spread evil around the world, who invade countries, who kill millions, who pillage the wealth of nations, manipulate facts, create lies, and don't even take the most basic measures for respect for rights? This is an outrage to the issue of promotion of human rights, and I think the politicization of this of this House will one day destroy the what we created in 2006. We did it not for this body to be a futile tool in the hands of those who want to play politics and who want to polarize within the sides within this organization. No one, I think, can disregard that the main authors of this resolution are a coalition of governments that terrorize each other, that are constantly in conflict with each other, and they only unite to promote terrorism and to contribute to the spilling of blood, and only compete to spread chaos and destruction in all kinds of countries, including my country, Iran, and others. And let me just give you a very simple example regarding the hypocrisy and the lies of these governments, including the Saudi regime. I'd like each one of you to just use your smartphone to go Raqqa dirty secret. If you put it in Google, Raqqa dirty secret, BBC News, to read the details of this deal that has been documented and using pictures and recordings, a deal between the international coalition led by the United States in Syria and its militias on the ground with the organization Daesh, the terrorist group, to allow hundreds of its combatants to leave, especially foreign combatants, from the Syrian city of Raqqa with their weapons and equipment, and to go to other areas far from the control of the Syrian army. All this to prevent the freeing of Syrian lands from terrorists. Again, promoted by, and sponsored by the governments that submit this resolution here. And after all this, you want to trust them to introduce a resolution on human rights? What's scandalous is that the government of Saud presents a draft resolution on human rights, no matter what part of the world it affects. Kings and princes of this family, of the family of Saud, are today responsible for evil and even are bragging about it. They think that their money, their weapons, and the military bases, the foreign bases that protect them, they think that they can buy people with that. They can finance terrorism and threaten people, to impose the logic of lies, fabrication, and the rule of the strongest, and financial corruption on everyone. I think our organization should be ashamed if one day it will agree to this Saudi blackmail, if it remains silent in the face of the crimes of the Sauds, who have caused thousands of deaths among civilians in Yemen, and the destruction of this small country. The shame is that we support a Saudi draft resolution on human rights in Syria. We know that Saudi Arabia is the biggest and one of the most dangerous dictatorships in the world, that uses money and undermines the image of religion to oppress its people and to support terrorism in Syria and all around the world. The draft resolution that we have before us today is a reflection of the hysteria and the political impotence of the Saudi regime and their friends and sponsors in the face of the defeat that they have been subjected to by our army and our allies. And I think the admission of Hamad bin Jassim, the former prime minister and foreign minister of the Qatari regime, which were made last week on official television, and I quote what he said: "When the Syrian crisis began, I went to Saudi Arabia and I met the Prince Herr Abdallah and according to the instructions of the Prince Father in Qatar. And I explained this situation, I explained the scenario in Syria, and he told me that we're with you. The Prince Heir of Saudi Arabia said to the Prime Minister of Qatar, said, "We're with you. You can go ahead. We'll coordinate this whole matter, and you'll be in charge of it." And so we did take over this issue, and I am still quoting. And we have comprehensive proof regarding this coordination and leadership, and everything that will go to Syria. I mean, the funding and money and the weapons will pass through Turkey. The coordination of the U.S. coalition. So the Saudi and Qatari regimes are enemies, but they are in agreement when it comes to financing and the promotion of terrorism to destroy my country, because they are inspired by the same Wahhabi source, and they in fact they compete for claiming authorship of this ideology. In conclusion, the presentation by the Saudi delegation on behalf of a group of sponsors of a draft resolution that criticizes what they call the human rights situation in Syria is a contradiction. It's very difficult to even realize how serious a contradiction, because this dictatorial regime doesn't even have the right to speak of human rights within this international organization, given its terrible track record and its history in these areas against their own citizens and against the diaspora, Saudi diaspora, that are treated inhumanely, especially if they're not Muslims and they are on Saudi territory. Perhaps you've heard the story that's not very funny, that was told in Saudi Arabia some time ago when they allowed women to drive. Of course, on condition that the women didn't put on makeup when they got in the car, and they had to be back home before sunset. Wahhabism, this Saudi Wahhabism with its sponsors and those who accept it, could be considered as a fourth weapon of mass destruction. It is continuing to spread and can be very dangerous and could destroy much more than chemical, nuclear, and other weapons. Just see today, after centuries, that the emergence of this violent and extremist ideology. Look at the amount of victims of this ideology that we're seeing in Syria and Lebanon, in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in Somalia, in Nigeria, in Pakistan, in the northern countries, in New York, in Boston, in London, in Belgium, in Germany, in Paris, in Nice. The list is very long. Mr. Chairman, as we speak of the coalition that sponsored terrorism and that have sponsored the resolution today, we also would like to mention the Turkish regime that, through its support for terrorism, has contributed to the displacement of hundreds of thousands of Syrians. The Turkish regime that has used this movement of refugees to put pressure on European governments. And this Turkish regime, it has opened its borders to tens of thousands of foreign combatants from around the world, according to the report by a panel from the Security Council. Some of these terrorists have crossed the border with Turkey with their chemical weapons that they took from Libya into Syria under the auspices of the Turkish authorities. These are verified facts, mentioned even by Turkish members of parliament in their national parliament. If Syria expected the United Nations to protect it from terrorism that has been promoted and sponsored by kings and princes of Saudi Arabia and others, we would have never defeated terrorism. But we need to recall that while You're here in this room to vote a draft resolution sponsored by the religious dictatorship that's the most violent in the world. The Syrian people and the Syrian army are writing a new history with their victory and thanks to their heroism in the international war against terrorism that is sponsored by those who have sponsored this draft resolution. In Syria, we're fighting terrorism. Instead of you, ladies and gentlemen, I call on member states not to fall into this Saudi and Qatari trap. And also, the non-aligned countries are important. I call on the member states to vote against the draft resolution, this politicized draft resolution. The rejection of this draft resolution will prevent terrorists and their sponsors to use a new form of weapon against the Syrian people and the Syrian friends of Syria. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the Syrian Arab Republic